Hello everyone, it's Ange de Lumière here, coming live for the second video of my 4 parts video series on business spirit guides, leading up to my workshop, my free webinar on Monday. So I've come to talk a little bit about spirit guides because not everybody knows what they are. So yesterday I did a specific video where I explained what spirit guides are, the difference between spirit guides and angels and other people, whatever it is, because there's lots of different non-physical beings that you can connect with. And I'm specifically geared towards business. So I think, and I know there's angels of business, but it's and angels of money and angels of lots of things, but I believe that working with a spirit guide is much more practical than working with angels in this respect, even though I love angels and I work with them all the time. Sorry, my eye's itching a bit. So let's start on the topic of this video, as you might have seen in the title, is why would someone like Steve Jobs want to work with us? And here I'm going to be quite specific because actually I've come out of the closet about Steve Jobs being my main business guide. When I say main, I actually have a boardroom of business guides that get together, and there's no ego in the spirit world. So you have to understand that whoever Steve Jobs was when he was in his last incarnation, he's a very different person now. And I think that's the opening statement. And I want to talk about this because yesterday I started a conversation in a business group that I found fascinating. And I asked if what was exactly the question that I asked? Let me just check, because it was fascinating, the answers I got. I got some really polarized reactions to my question. And I sort of anticipated that anyway. But I was curious to see how people would react to that. So my question was, if Steve Jobs asked you to work with him as a business spirit guide, what would you do? And it was completely split. Like, so half people said yes, half people said no. And a lot of people who said no said it on the basis of what he was like in his last incarnation, obviously, as Steve Jobs, because he might have other lives. He has had other lives, and he will probably have other lives. So, well, I guess that brings me a bit to the subject of reincarnation, which sometimes is a little bit difficult for people to stomach or even to espouse. And I need to say that for myself, I've always been fascinated by the fact, and the reason why, for me, it always made sense. And I'm going to share it with you just to see if that helps you open your mind, because you really need to have an open mind to work with business guides. And for me, I actually believed in other past lives, future lives, whatever it is, in reincarnation generally, ever since I was 15 years old. And that's something unusual for a girl who was raised in a Catholic environment, because Catholicism is not at all linked to past lives. But I had this gut feeling that I'd been there before. And when I realized, I had a bit of an aha moment when I was having an argument with my sister. And as children, we argued a lot, my sister and I, and today that's not the case. We get along beautifully. So I don't want you to think, that is an ongoing thing. Even if it was, it doesn't really matter. But what I want to say is, sorry, my other eye is itchy now. I was having this argument with my sister, and I turned to her, and I remember being 15, and I looked at her and I said, look, we chose to be sisters in this life. Why don't we try to get along? And she looked at me like I was possessed. But that's the feeling I had. I thought, why are we arguing? Why are we doing this? We're supposed to get along. How can we make this work? And ever since that moment, I was on a quest to try and understand about past lives, reincarnation, all that sort of thing. I was fascinated by Buddhism. Again, interesting, since I had never been in touch with any Buddhists. My life was really revolved around, my father was very a devout Catholic, who, by the way, lived his values, so quite different from, I suppose, other people. I'm not going to say the majority, that would be really putting people in a big bag. I don't like to do that. So yeah, and then I started to have some proof of this life before and after death. When I say proof, it's never proof, but it's like breadcrumbs. And I suppose I need to talk about this, because otherwise you wouldn't understand why Steve Jobs, who is in between lives, I don't think he's reincarnated yet, why would he work with us? Why is he involved in what we're doing? So how I started to become more and more aware of the possibility of reincarnation and life after death, I started reading lots and lots of books about it, and I was hungry for these stories. I was hungry for a different way to see this. But what really nailed it for me is that I thought to myself, if I only had this life, I wouldn't have that much time to do anything, really. A lifetime is not that much time. So surely if I make mistakes in this lifetime, I should be given a chance to put them right in another lifetime. And that's how my quest started. That's how I started to believe that, yeah, maybe there's a plan, maybe when. And also the other thing I was quite a philosopher as a teen, actually. And I said to myself, I'm a woman in this lifetime, and surely I can't be just limited to this point of view. If I'm going to be learning about life and grow and become wiser, surely I should have had a life as a man as well, just to balance things out. And that's where all these quests started. That's where all this questioning started of my own religious upbringing with Catholicism, and generally Christianity, because Catholics are part of the Christian faith. You know, I was told in Sunday school that at the end of our lives we are judged, and that we will either go to heaven or to hell. And I was like, no, this doesn't feel right to me. This doesn't make sense. Surely, and I knew God was love. I knew God was unconditional love. So for me, that didn't make sense. That's how when I started to depart, I actually refused to do my confirmation. I said to my dad, I'm sorry, there's too many things in the Catholic faith that don't sit with me. And I was lucky that even though he was very religious himself, he got it. He said, okay, I understand. You don't have to do it if you don't want to do it. So this brings us nicely actually to Steve Jobs, because he was a controversial person. He was magnetic. He did lots of good things. He created something that has had a lasting impact on us, and that we cannot deny the good that's come out of it. Of course, there's always, some bad sides. People have their nose in their phones all the time now. But it's like if you said a knife is bad because some people can cut themselves with it. What Steve Jobs created was this personal computer, and I'm grateful every day for having a personal computer, because I was born at the time when actually computers were just a room full of. I'm the same generation of Steve Jobs, so I was born at the time when a computer was a room full of these big cupboards. Well, it's not cupboards, but with those big things turning around, making a huge sound. That was reserved for companies, big organizations. And I feel that having given the personal computer to individuals has completely freed us. It's completely freed us to also run our own business. I wouldn't be running my own business if the personal computer hadn't been invented. So I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm not too much of a techie, and I certainly never worshipped the man. Actually, it was the opposite. I had the reaction that most people on my post yesterday had, which was, I don't like the way he was a bully. I don't like the way that he humiliated people, and I don't want to have anything to do with him. And that's actually how I've shared this story before, but I'm sharing it again. The first time that Steve Jobs reached out to me to ask me to work with me, I said no. I don't want to be in touch with you. I didn't like you as human. I didn't like you what you did when you were on Earth. Okay, you did some big things, but I didn't like your attitude. I didn't like your bullying. I didn't like the masculine way that you, and also the whole thing. Probably because I was a business lawyer, and I started my career in law firms. where we were asked to do exactly what Steve Jobs asked of his people, like to work from 8 o'clock to midnight, to completely ignore our health, our families. It was completely antisocial. And so, yeah, no, I wasn't at all happy with him. Luckily, as I said, he's a very different person in the spirit world that he was on earth. And I've come to realize that probably he chose this personality because he had something big to do. And once you're incarnated, even if you choose a plan, you also can go wrong. And no one's supposed to lead a perfect life. You know, people who become famous are put in the spotlight. They're scrutinized. All their faults are brought to the surface. It's almost like we put them on the pedestal so we can bring them down. And I posted on my page a beautiful video by my business mentor, Tash Corbin, just about that yesterday. Which made me understand, even at a more deeper level, the kind of life that Steve Jobs might have had. He wasn't perfect by any means. He was actually full of issues on an emotional perspective. But at the same time, he had this huge purpose. And I believe that some of these traits served his purpose in a way to stay focused. But I also have a feeling that he has a lot of regrets where he is now about how he did things when he was on Earth. And I think that's also part of the reason why he's contacted me and wants to work with me. I believe that he might be wanting to work with other people as well. But where he's coming from is that now that he's gathered all this first-hand experience on Earth and he's back in heaven, there's only heaven for me. Then there's different levels, sort of like there's different type of vibration. There's high vibe, low vibe, and anything in the middle. But it's all the spirit world. There's not a segregation. There's not one place that bad people are sent and the place that good people are sent. It's a bit the same as with the law of attraction. You just go where your vibe fits. So, and for me, it's important in discussion. I know I'm getting a bit esoteric, but the closest to the God energy, which is pure unconditional love with no judgment whatsoever, it's of such a high vibration that actually most of us can't reach that level. And it's not a judgment or anything, it's just that we don't have a vibe high enough for this. As long as we have judgment, as long as we have these emotions, especially when we're human, it's very difficult to be human, to be high vibe, because our bodies contain emotions, they contain chemicals, they contain I'm going to say the wrong words because I'm not that scientifically inclined. Molecules of emotion is the word that comes to me, because I've read the book and it's really interesting. So all these flood our bodies, which means that we're a mix of positive and negative, and we can't help it. And part of it is because we need a little bit of fear in our body to keep us alive. If we had no fear whatsoever, we would get engaged in extremely dangerous occupations, hazardous occupations. So it's like this survival thing that's inbuilt in our bodies, but it also affects our mind and it affects the way we look at things. And so it's a potential recipient for all that fear to come in. And this is what happened to Steve Jobs. I think when he incarnated, he had this plan, he had his blueprint, and things went astray because he became human. And when you become human, things happen that are not that don't go according to the plan. And of course, now that he's in the spirit world, he has regrets, and he would like to put it right. And he could have been doing this in two ways, and he might do it in two ways actually. By going back and having another life where he decides on certain scripts and certain things to put things right where he went wrong. But then again, once you're incarnated, you forget the plan and you might go completely off trail. But I think at the moment he's more interested to work with entrepreneurs to help businesses that are meant to make an impact and change the way we do business. He wants to support these people, and I think I am one of them. I'm not saying I'm the only one, and I was surprised that he actually chose to come and work with me. I'm actually now delighted that he has, even though at the beginning I was very reluctant. I tend to argue a lot with my guides anyway, because I never take things for granted. I don't think I should just do what they ask just because they ask me. It's like any relationship. You need to build that relationship. You need to spend time with them to get to know them, and they need to get to know you. And just like any relationship, it has to evolve. It's not going to be like, you don't ask someone for a date and then directly take them to bed. And it's the same thing with guides. You don't just decide, okay, I'm going to work with them, that's it, we're best buddies. No, you have to build that relationship. It's an energy. And so that's what we did with Steve Jobs. At the beginning, I just sent him away. I said, I don't want to hear from you. I don't like you. Get lost, basically. But he came back after a while. And at that time, I was maybe a bit more ready to listen to what he had to say. So I said, I'll consider it. I wasn't still too keen on saying yes yet, but I said I'll consider it. And then it so happened that I was training with the Psychic Business Academy with Carrie Cardozo, and we had a session every month as part of the mentoring for our training. And she said, absolutely, Steve Jobs wants to work with you. He came in almost every sessions that I had with her with some advice, and the very first thing he said is that I'm not the person I was on earth. Please give me a chance. And I always give people a chance, to be frank, if they ask nicely. So that's what I did. And ever since I've started working with him actively, because I think he's been around for a long time, he's shown me aspects of him that he's obviously a lot kinder than he was on earth. He's obviously a lot wiser, and he sees the bigger picture. And I know he said once that he wished he had had the wisdom that I had in the way he conducted his life, because he has a lot of regrets about having neglected his family, about having been that abusive person, that bully around the place, where he could have done things differently. He got carried away by power, which is quite easy, you know. Who knows how we would react if we were put on the spot in his shoes with that much power. And that's why sometimes people are actually afraid of being in power, and it's much easier to criticize people that are in power than just to be in the hot seat, because you're still going to be the same person. You're still going to have your issues. You're still going to make mistakes. You have to forgive yourself for these mistakes, and you have to get on with it. So maybe that's also one of the messages that Steve Jobs comes with in business, is that we are not supposed to be perfect. We come as we are with our vision, but what's really important is to have that big vision. And he had a big vision, and I have a big vision, and I guess he likes my big vision. My big vision is to bring spirituality into business. And when you look at it that way, it makes complete sense he wants to work with me, because that's the one thing that he didn't quite manage to do in his lifetime. And if you've watched any of his documentaries, or if you read his biography, he was a spiritual seeker. The only problem is that his ego came in the way, and it kind of spoiled a bit everything, because the more he got power, the more his ego, he wasn't like trained properly to deal with his ego, and so the ego took over, so to speak. So he had this charisma, he had everything, but he actually failed to combine spirituality and business. And that's what my calling is. That's what my purpose is. I started off in the corporate world as a business lawyer, international business lawyer. I traveled the world. I did all sorts of things. I actually worked with people who were in the same kind of positions as Steve Jobs in negotiations and stuff, and I found that fascinating. But for me, what was missing is this spiritual connection. So I guess Steve Jobs come back to do that with me, and I'm grateful in a way, because I don't think I'm that good with business. I don't think I'm as much an entrepreneur as he is, but I'm definitely a creative, and I'm definitely spiritual. And if you've signed up for my memoir, or you might have received an email where I said that actually Steve Jobs wrote the foreword to my memoir, and one of the things that he said in it was that he wished he had had me as his spiritual advisor when he was on earth. And I know that's kind of a tall order to say, and I don't mean this to make myself sound special, but more to explain the whole dynamic of our relationship between me and Steve Jobs. And so that's to explain to you, why would someone like Steve Jobs, and a lot of people actually believe once you die you need to leave people to rest in peace, but actually the spirit world is very alive and it's very close to us. And if you watch the Abraham Hicks videos, or if you're interested in their teachings, for me they're one of the best teachings that you can listen to. They always say that people who have been passionate about something when they were on earth are still passionate about it when they're in the spirit world, and they want to help those who will take that thing one step further. And so they're like cheerleaders. They just come and say, okay, well, I'm going to help that person. And what's really important to understand, even though we're going to have 2 more videos on this topic where I'm going to explore other aspects, is that what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Is that we always have control if we say yes or no. Nobody can force us to work with a spirit guide or business guide if we don't want to. But you also need to realize that a lot of people work with spirit guides without knowing that they actually do. They're just not aware of what's happening. They think their ideas are brilliant, whereas it's ideas that are planted into them by some spirit guides. But if you learn how to do this in a more focused and a more systematic way, you become, I'm going to say unstoppable. You become unstoppable because you get all that knowledge, and it's like having a look into the bigger picture. It's like having shortcuts to what's going to happen. You know, in business, one of the things that actually trips me quite a bit is that there's so many options, there's so much self-doubt that creeps in, there's so many different ways that you could do things. How do you choose? And I find that while working with spirit guides, they help me to choose what's right for me, because every business is totally unique. There's no 2 ways to do things, and it has to fit with yourself. It has to fit with and I talked about this quite extensively on Monday in the podcast about Business Akashic Records. So if you haven't watched or listened to the episode, please, I invite you to do that. And I'm going to finish off this video today by inviting you to join me for my webinar on Monday. There's a sign up link so you can receive the Zoom link. Obviously, if you want to work with me, reach out as well. I can be reached through Facebook. That's the best way to do that. I don't share my email address because there's too much spam going around. So yeah, Facebook Messenger is the best place to do that. So why, just to try and summarize, why would Steve Jobs wants to work with us? I'm saying Steve Jobs as an illustration of the point, a famous businessman, but it could be someone that's not so famous, and that's something I'm going to address in video number 4. Steve Jobs wants to work with, I'm going to say with me because I know he works with me, because he wants to continue, he wants to put right and help me do what he hasn't finished in his lifetime. And also, most recently, he also said that that's also why he wants to support me with my memoir, which I wasn't aware at all before, because he has some unfinished business with his children, and on some level, I guess he would like his kids to read my book. But yeah, that's another story for another day. So I hope you found this video interesting. I would love to be able to continue the conversation with you during my webinar, where it will be much more interactive. Obviously, you can ask questions in the comments, but it will be much easier to do that in a Zoom room where we can hear each other and we can converse. And I would love to have you on board. So if you want to sign up, I'll add the link on the video after this is posted, and I will do another video tomorrow with how do spirit guides help us. Bye for now. Have a good day.